Thank you for joining us tonight at Dervilia. In 10 years of Music Talks, actually, this is the first time it's not been at the bookstore, and so it's actually wonderful. I want to thank Adele. I know she's way down there at the front for having us here tonight. And I have two guests with me. The first is our maestro this week, Robert Franz. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
And our other guest is the esteemed composer. I like that, esteemed.
So do I.
Yeah. Okay.
Better than steam.
Let's add it
for
to
sure.
the. Let's add it to the bio.
Keep
The
it going. Keep it going.
esteemed, composer and dear friend of the SSO and dear friend of mine, Vincent Ho.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
We have a very cool concert this weekend because we're giving a world premiere of a piece we commissioned. Of Vincent's new piece with Grammy Award winner Timothy McAllister. We'll talk about how incredibly strange it is that our discussions led to us getting a Grammy Award winner to come and play her piece, but we'll get there. And the best part was when we reached out to Robert and said, we want to do this concert, you were like, yes, I want to play Vincent's music. This is exciting. I want to do this. And I remember as we were talking back and forth about it, how the Rachmaninoff came to be. We have saxophones in the room, which is not always. Orchestras tend to shame the saxophone.
It's true. And when you think about a saxophone piece, there are really two, right? There's pictures at an exhibition, and then there's Rachmaninoff symphonic dances.
Yeah, or Bolero.
Oh, Bolero.
There's two of them in Bolero.
Yeah, okay, right,
it's
right,
too
Bolero.
many. Yeah,
3 pieces.
we did that last year, so it's all good.
That's so
but
last year,
it
Mark.
is. Yeah, it is very rare that we get to have saxophones on stage with us.
And as a soloist in this, not only in the concerto, but in the piece, I mean, there's a real moment that I think everything stops. And it was actually Richard Rodney Bennett, who was the great arranger and great composer, friend of Broadway and Gershwin, who said to Rachmaninoff, hey, you should use this saxophone instrument. It's got a beautiful sound. And so, honestly, I think Rachmaninoff wrote one of the most beautiful sax solos, probably second only to Vince's, ever written.
There you go.
Your check's in the mail.
Okay, so before we get to that concerto, let's talk about the symphonic dances because they are a fascinating piece. One of our we had a chamber music concert this past weekend. One of our musicians was introducing a piece of music that has a dance in it, but no one ever dances to. Mm-hmm. The symphonic dances are dances that no one really could ever dance to.
Well, they have actually, and in fact, in his mind, he had this as an idea to be a ballet because he had just written before it the famous Paganini Variations, which was a ballet, and he wanted Fokine, the guy who was the choreographer for Diaghilev, to use this music as a ballet. The problem was Fokine died before he could do that, and so
That really slows it down.
That really slowed it down dramatically. And so it really wasn't until, I think it was like, honestly, the 60s or the 70s before a choreographer really took the piece and was able to choreograph it. So it's been choreographed. But it really is sort of dance-like in nature, but it's also very evocative, right? Each of the movements has kind of a different feel, and originally each one had a title. So like the first movement was called Noon. The second movement was called Dusk, and the third was Midnight. So it was like the course of a day and sort of the transfiguration of time through the day. I think he eventually dropped those, and it became sort of more aleatoric, but still quite beautiful. But there's also kind of a religious connotation to the piece in that he was really, this was the last piece that Rachmaninoff wrote, the last serious piece that he wrote. And it was a piece in which he was living in the United States at the time, but he was sort of hearkening back to his Russian roots, and particularly to the Russian Orthodox Church. And so in it, you'll hear church music in the first movement, Russian church music, and in the third movement, the famous Dies Irae, which is followed by an Alleluia that is also sort of a church tune. And so in the end, there's a sort of death to resurrection kind of feel to the last movement. So there's this undercurrent under this piece that is really quite extraordinary. When you listen to it and just listen to the piece, you think, wow, this is beautiful. I could just get into this. It's got all the great hip Rachmaninoff tunes. It's got dance rhythms. It's fun. But then you get underneath the hood and you start to really tinker around, and you're like, wow, there's something really profound about the way this guy wrote it. Now, I compare it often to the Second Symphony, because the Second Symphony, which is literally twice as long, is equally as beautiful. But in this symphonic dances, I think Rachmaninoff was able to take what he wrote in that symphony and distill it to its purest, clearest, cleanest roots and really present it. And I think that composers do that often late in life, where they realize, I don't have to say quite as much as I thought I did, as long as everything I say is important.
Mm-hmm. And he I also love that you get this late in life. He also references himself.
Yes.
He gives us these Easter eggs in the piece where if you know Rachmaninoff, you're going to hear quotes of him.
In the first movement, he quotes himself from his first symphony, which was a complete and total and utter disaster. Audiences hated it. People hated it. He thought he was over as a composer. He would never make it in this world. And so he said, well, fine. Here, I'm going to show you. And he took the tune. He put it in a major mode so it would have a little more upbeat feel. And it happens only at the coda, at the very end of the first movement, in, quite frankly, one of the most beautiful, most intimate moments of the dances. And all of a sudden, there you have this little echo of his first symphony, like he's doing this.
It is fantastic, and you do hear that age and that pedigree in him in this piece of music. It's really a fantastic.
Nothing's extra. It's all specific.
Incredibly express. Yeah. It's a fantastic work. I'm thrilled we get to actually do it. I'm thrilled we have a saxophone. Now we're not going to make Tim play that part.
No.
Don't worry. We'll get to why there's extra saxophones in the room in a moment. But it is one of the best saxophone solos there is in the orchestral repertoire.
Yeah. I mean, it's gorgeous, and then it gets taken over by the violin and cello line, and it's just one of those things where the saxophone really gets a sink in their teeth. And what makes it so beautiful isn't even just the solo, although the solo is quite lovely, is that Rachmaninoff writes this oscillating accompaniment in the winds that just sort of, like, if you heard it on its own, you'd think, okay, well, that's fine. But somehow the combination of this doody feel and this beautiful solo on top gives you this sense of timelessness. Like, it's just, you all of a sudden lose sense of time.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece, and I'm thrilled we get to do it this weekend. Also, it was great because it is the 150th anniversary of Rachmaninoff this year.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I didn't know that either.
We just did the Paganini variations last month, about 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
And so one of the questions was, why so much Rachmaninoff? It is his 150th anniversary year. So
And his music's great.
it is great. and effortlessly timeless, because it sort of existed out of time even when he wrote it, because it wasn't like what was written by his contemporaries.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And there's something deeply romantic and deeply spiritual about it, but there's also something with edge isn't the right word, but definitely it is a leaning forward kind of piece of music.
Exactly. You've paired it, actually, at the top of the show with a wonderful piece by Jean Coulthard.
Yes.
Now, the thing about Jean Coulthard is not enough people know her music.
Yes.
I fell in love with Jean Coulthard as a young pianist because my teacher was like, here, you're going to play this. And I think it was a piece called Whitecaps, which used to be on the grade 9 syllabus. And that was the moment I fell in love with Jean Coulthard, one of the great Canadian composers.
Yeah, so I'm an American.
Yep.
And
we won't hold it against you.
Thank you. Yeah. And when I became music director of the Windsor Symphony in 2013, I all of a sudden became immersed in the classical music world of Canada, which I had spent my career up to that point working with lots of living composers in the United States and having a great time and kind of getting to know them and that kind of thing. And so when I came over the river, in Detroit River to Windsor.
South. You went south to Windsor.
I know. I rode. All of a sudden, yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, there was a whole world of new composers. And I have to say that Jean Coulthard's music all of a sudden really spoke to me. And there's something about it that is much like the Rachmaninoff, incredibly expressive, but very thoughtful. And something inside is just enough of an edge to give you something to hold on to. But there's also some incredible beauty. And, you know, she studied with Copland. She studied with Ralph Vaughan Williams. Her music has this sort of impressionistic kind of feel to it, very color-oriented. And in fact, the work itself is called Kalamalka, which is named after the lake in British Columbia, which I've discovered, I haven't seen yet, but I've discovered changes colors each time of the year depending because of the chemistry in it. Somehow the heat and the cold changes the color of the lake. Well, that's kind of cool. I can't wait to go see it. So she wrote a piece that was inspired by Kalamalka. So the piece is very colorful in nature. Like there's a sense of the timbres of the orchestra. She's really experimenting and exploring. And the reason I loved it with the Rachmaninoff is because they both do the exact same thing.
They explore color and the relationship they're in. Yeah. It's a great pairing. I remember when you sent that over, I was like, "That is brilliant. Well done, you."
Well, thank you. I've done this just once or twice.
Okay,
before,
that's
but
fair.
thank
That's
you.
good. That's good. You've given it
It's
a
a
go.
good choice. It really is a good choice. No, Jean.
As a Canadian composer, Vince, Jean Coulthard. I mean, she is one of the great, and sort of not. I mean, she doesn't get her dues.
Oh, she's an icon.
She is an icon, and yet most audience members don't know who she was.
Oh, she's one of the finest Canadian composers ever lived. I mean, she was one of that generation that helped define Canada's musical culture, musical identity, and inspired generations of great composers that followed, I guess, not her tradition, but the musical impact that she has had. I mean, you have composers like Kanan Chan, who was my teacher, and he's a 3-time Juno Award-winning composer, and you see the influence of her beautiful, sincere is the word that I would describe Jean Coulthard's music. It's very sincere, and you see that in his music as well as all the other composers who she's taught for, God, how many years? Like 40 years at UBC? Yeah. So she's left an incredible legacy that still resonates to this day.
Yeah, and she kind of gave Canadian music at its time an identity.
Yes, very much so.
And an identity that sort of has stayed. You know, there was a lot of composers in those mid 1900s that actually did kind of give identity sounds. Not all of those sounds have stayed as long. Whereas you can hear her even in some of Jocelyn Morlock's stuff, the late wonderful so. Jocelyn, and she just had that impact on us because she sounded like Canada.
Well, absolutely, and I recall like during my early years studying the piano, some of the earliest contemporary works I studied was works by Jean Coulthard. Not only because it's beautiful music, but she just knows how to write it so well for the instrument. It just fits so well under your fingers, and that's just something that as a composer that I learned so much about. It's not just how well you write in terms of like how it sounds, the harmony and technique, but also the tactile element, the gestural element, where the second you play it, it's Jean Coulthard. It just feels like Jean Coulthard, and that's something that has really stuck with me. In fact, influenced me as a composer for piano. I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been trying to define my own pianistic language, the Vincent Ho piano practice, and it's been my lifelong, I guess, 10 years. It's becoming a lifelong passion, trying to continually develop my pianistic language. So
I think you have a pianistic language, and I say that on behalf of pianists who have played your music.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry only because my music is hard.
It's very hard.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God! When I was a young pianist, I remember receiving a copy of your 3 Scenes of Childhood. I think in 2001 is when I first got it, so it was pretty new.
Well, thank you for playing that.
And I believe I started playing it the following year, and I can still count the first movement in my head.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that's how hard it was to learn as a young pianist. I went, what?
Okay, well, to my defense, I was 21 when I wrote that, and I was trying to prove myself as a composer.
And it's an incredible piece of music.
Well, thank you so much.
It stands the test of time. I as a young musician, it also felt like a great accomplishment to be able to learn it, because I loved new music. I played a lot of new music. I still love new music, but it was new music at a level that was new to me. The last movement, as I recall, changes meter every bar. I think there's 2 bars that keep meter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of mixed meter there,
Yeah.
and a lot of I shouldn't say
piano technique things.
Well, I was exploring some fun piano technique. For example, okay, first of all, 3 Scenes of Childhood, and each title reflects a particular scenario of being a child. First movement's titled Playtime, and so there's a lot of playful little rhythms. very complicated, but still comes off as in character very playful. The second movement, an afternoon nap, and so it's very like there's actually no meter. I don't think there's it's been so many years since I played that, but there's no time signatures. It's very fluid. And the last movement is titled the tantrum, where I was exploring techniques of using your fists on on the keyboard and your palms, and then you finish off with your whole arm just smashing. Well, not smashing, but just a loud ending. Yeah. So there was a
So I'm gonna tell a tale out of school. So I remember playing it at a Saskatchewan Provincial Music Festival.
Yeah.
And I got lost in afternoon nap. Because it's been a long day. You're competing many times throughout the day, and so it was like, and I did what every good pianist does: is you fake it till you make it. And I found my way back.
I'm sure you were fine.
And I finished the piece, and the judge for the competition said, in the second movement there, I wasn't able to follow the music because I couldn't figure out where you were, so I just sat back and enjoyed, and I was like, mm-hmm. Yeah, it was about a minute and a half longer than it was supposed to be.
Oh, so you have you could have a career as an improviser.
There you go. Yeah, I'm glad I don't anymore. That was my first exposure to music. I've been a fan ever since. Our audience have been fan. Our orchestras are fans since we brought your music here with The Shaman, I think, was our first big piece.
2017. I won't forget that night. Yeah, I mean, it was a sold out. Yeah, thank you.
I
was there.
great.
I was blown away. It was all Canadian music, and 3 of the 4 composers that was programmed were there, and I was just blown away at what you did, because when I got the invitation, I saw the program. Wait, you're doing all Canadian? Are you going to be able to sell this concert?
I know. I had colleagues. I had colleagues across the country that are like, "That's not going to sell," and I was like, "Yes, it is."
It was sold out, and it was a night to remember. It was great, and ever since then, I mean, I just knew that anytime you want to go into battle, I'm by your side. All right. I even and I'll be honest. I wrote a piano work. My most recent piano work was a collection of 6 etudes called Supervillain Etudes,
Which are even harder.
Yes, we're even harder. Yes, and one of the movements. Okay, first of all, let me back up a bit. A couple years ago, I rediscovered my collection of Batman comic books, and at this time, I was really, really trying to find some inspiration to write a collection of concert etudes. I wanted to push my pianistic technique to the limits, but I just didn't have that inspiration. And then, as I was reading my comic books, I realized, wait a minute. All these villains of the Batman universe, they have some real interesting quirks. Now, my wife has a degree in psychology, and together we did these.
Which helps when you're a composer.
Yes, it does. Actually, yes, it does. Well, okay, she'll tell you stories. But I selected 6 of these villains. She and I created these psychological profiles of each of these villains. So, for example, Two-Face, PTSD, bipolar, also very zen, and always seeing things in black and white. And there's a whole there was pages of these psychological profiles of each villains. And so I took these profiles, gave it to these choreographer friends of mine, and I asked them, okay, if these were real people, reading these profiles, how would you recreate their mannerisms? What would their gestures be? How would they walk? How would they talk? And so I would film them. And taking that footage, I tried to recreate those gestures in pianistic form. Now, when I was writing Penguin, I just couldn't help but think of you. Because you are a mastermind, okay?
Yes, I believe actually what you texted me was you're an evil genius.
Yes, because the thing about the Penguin, I don't know if you know much about Batman villains, but Penguin, he has no superpower. His superpower is having leverage and just being able to work things behind the scenes to get people to do his bidding. And I'm like, this is so Mark Turner. But in a playful sense. It's just in a good way, because you know how to get things done. I mean, it's brilliant. And so that was the one movement that I dedicated to you. That was the only movement I dedicated to anybody, actually. So, but that just shows how much respect I have for you and what you've done with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra, and also the many, many creative adventures we've had so far.
And many more to come.
Yeah.
Now, this one, I remember reaching out to you and saying, I want to commission a piece.
Yes.
And let's talk. And we talked about all sorts of things. We talked briefly about a piano concerto, which I still think should come to life. And we talked about just a piece. And then you said, I want to write a saxophone concerto for Timothy McAllister. And I remember thinking, Timothy McAllister's not going to come to Saskatoon. So I was like, well, he'll write it for Timothy McAllister, and then like Tim will be like, that's really nice. I'm playing it with such and such. Who's playing it with you? And then we had a conversation on the phone, which we'll get to about birds. That'll come. And then Timothy McAllister was like, yeah, I'm so excited to come to Saskatoon.
Yeah, I told him about it.
I just told him we're a party. That's what this is. Timothy McAllister, Grammy Award winner,
Well, yeah.
probably the greatest living saxophone player there is.
Oh, well, one of the most important saxophone players there is.
Legendary.
yeah.
Like in a world full of superfluous compliments, he deserves all of them.
Well, yeah. Before him, the saxophone repertoire with like concerto was very tiny. Now, thanks to him, there's like 250 concertos that he's commissioned. I think concerto, or maybe.
He's just shy of 300 commissioned pieces.
Okay, yeah. And so thanks to him, he's created a huge repertoire of saxophone concertos that opens the door to new generations of saxophonists to be able to pursue a career as a soloist. Before that, saxophonists were limited because due to the nature of the orchestra, they were standardized in the 50s or 40s, I forget when, and saxophone did not make the cut. So what does that mean for saxophones? It means like for those players, they either have to create their own ensembles like jazz groups or rock bands, teach or do solo gigs, but rarely, and maybe perform with the orchestra, but only
Play the
those,
Creston.
Exactly.
The one concerto.
Or the
There's
Creston,
one concerto.
or just play as a sessional like in the Rachmaninoff.
Glazunov.
Right.
There's two.
Yeah.
But thanks to Timothy, now with like all these concertos, you're seeing this wealth of amazing saxophone soloists emerging, taking up these repertoire, taking up these the concertos, and taking on the world. And now it's become more and more of a normal thing to see a saxophone concerto being presented by orchestras.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic.
Because Tim's a genius and one of the great. I mean, he also is aside from being such a phenomenal champion of new music, he is quite literally one of the greatest musicians on earth.
Yeah.
His playing is astounding.
Well, I can verify. I mean, I wrote several works. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this concerto, is because I've had this long professional relationship with Timothy. I first met him, it was 2011 in Toronto. We were both invited for the Toronto Symphony's New Creations Festival. He was there to do the Canadian premiere of John Adams' City Noir. And during that same week, I was there for the performance of the Shaman Percussion Concerto with Evelyn Glennie. And so we got to be at each other's concerts. We were at the post-concert reception, and we had a blast just getting to know each other. And since then, we stayed in touch. And I wrote several works for him, either solo saxophone or saxophone and piano. And I got a sense as to the kind of musician he is. And so during those, I guess, it's been 12 years already, I felt that after all these years of writing these works for Timothy, the next logical step was to take it to the symphonic realm. Let's take what I've learned from working with this genius and just like throw everything in the kitchen sink into this concerto. And that's why he and we were so excited that you were open to the idea. I mean, it was something that it's been in gestation, I guess, for the last, several years. He's been wanting the concerto for me and I've been wanting to write for him for a number of years. And so now it's coming to life, and that's why he's so excited to be here in Saskatoon and also to party with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember the phone call we had talking about whimsical music for fanciful birds.
Yes.
And which is a piece you wrote for him.
Yes.
And I went, birds? Now, we had a conversation with the wonderful Christy Morrissey at the university, who is one of the world's leading bird migration researchers. And in I think it was 2019, she had released research around how songbirds were losing their sense of migration due to the impacts of pesticides. And I became fascinated by that concept creatively because a lot of the migration of songbirds actually does rely on their ability to make noise and sing. And as they lose, as they are affected, not only do they lose their sense of direction, they lose their sense of song. And they also, from what I understand, lose a lot to do with their reproduction. So they're not only are they not able to get to where they reproduce, they're not able to reproduce anymore.
Right.
And I remember saying that to you, and we went, "Oh man, there's an idea there."
Exactly. There was an idea there. I mean, it was a perfect fit because I had already written these 3 books, collections of saxophone works, and the series is titled "Whimsical Sketches of Fanciful Birds," and 5 movements in each book, so 15 pieces each. But each movement is inspired by a species of birds. And throughout the entire series, I mean, I guess this spans about 8 years of composing this series, off and on. It allowed me to explore all the possibilities of what the saxophone can do, especially trying to recreate sounds of birds. And so when you brought up that what Christy Morrissey does, the Facility of Advanced Avian Research that you have here at the University of Saskatchewan, it just dawned on me. Okay, now this is something that is a perfect fit. I want to study. I want to research more of this. There's something there that needs. No, needs to be represented in artistic form in some way. But I really need to do the research if I'm to be able to create a sincere portrait of what this theme is really going to be about. And it was mind-blowing. Just first of all, meeting Christy Morrissey, who will be there at the concert, interviewing her graduate students, learning about what bird migration and the impact that human activity has had on bird migration, especially light pollution of cities. I did not even realize light was considered pollution at all, and so that was eye-opening to me. And so all this information, and there was a lot, informed my creative decisions as I was composing this piece. For example, I thought to myself, okay, flocks of birds. Okay, how can I create an environment where it'll immediately, for the audience, feel that they are being surrounded by birds? And so I bounced this idea with Mark, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to have saxophone players placed in the balconies, responding to whatever Timothy's playing on stage to recreate the sound of a flock of birds as if the audience is in a forest. And so throughout the course of this 30-minute work, you're going to hear the saxophonists just like singing or playing to one another or responding to whatever is happening on the stage throughout the entire piece. So you could say it's like a 3D sonic experience. And in addition to that, I felt, okay, you know what? It needs these bookends. And what do I mean by that? I wanted to incorporate audio files, sound recordings of birds, because as I quickly learned, the world of the bird community, those who like follow the birds, ornithology and bird watchers, they are passionate about birds. They are absolutely passionate. They can identify a bird call like nobody's business. And so I felt, you know what? This is critical. This is important. If it's going to be about birds, then let's bring the audience to the birds. So I had a friend of mine forward me all of the collected sound files that he has of every single bird that he has that is natural to the Canadian environment of this location. And we created these 2 sound files, one for the introduction and one for the extra. So that way, the second the lights go out, you suddenly hear these flock of birds, and you are there. You are in that environment, and then the orchestra emerges to take over to carry on that sound world. So I'm giving away the punchlines of the piece here. Okay,
but it's brilliant. And Robert, what's it like to take on a piece like this? This is, I'm sure you've gotten to do new concertos, and I'm not sure you've gotten to do a new saxophone concerto. You may be.
I've actually done.
Oh, you have.
Yeah.
There you go. Fancy.
I didn't know that.
Okay, look at you.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I'm not your first?
Yes, you are, Vince.
20 points.
You are
20
totally
points.
my first.
But have you done a saxophone concerto with 6 other saxophones in the room?
No. So this is really it's quite astounding actually, and the way it's written. So we were actually just talking about when you're a conductor, and I think you're sort of facing a new piece. This concerto, for instance, it really is incumbent upon me not to have too many personal opinions or judgments about what's going on, and just sort of delve in and try to get inside the mind of the composer and see if I can sort of figure out, what is it that he's trying to say, and how do I bring these dots on the page to life. In this case, there is the added dimension of the sort of choreography of it. So how you make it work with the saxes and the audience and the sax on stage. And we actually talked, I think your original idea was maybe to have a second conductor. which I wasn't as keen on as you were, because I thought, well, let me just see. And so this is going to be a grand experiment this weekend. Let me see if I can really just sort of like manage this in a circle, because there are pieces where there are musicians out in the hall. So it's not the first time that's ever happened, but your piece in particular is very complex in the terms of levels and the way it works. And so I'm really super excited to see how we put it together. So the way we're going to rehearse this is on Thursday night. We're doing it in a rehearsal space. We're going to have all the saxes lined up right next to me. The ones that are going to be on the left are going to be on my left, the ones on the right, so that I can see them and hear them, and they're right there. And then on Friday, we're going to rehearse just the saxes in the hall. Then we're going to put the orchestra with the saxes. Then we're going to put it all together. Saturday, it's going to all go together. And Saturday night, it's going to be brilliant.
Seamless.
That's the goal.
Okay, well, now that I know. No, and the only reason why I suggested having a second conductor is because I worked with a lot of conductors on my music before, and as you know, my music is not
hard.
easy, and so I just felt, okay, well, the conductor, whoever, I didn't know it was going to be Robert at the time, whoever it is, they're going to have their hands full with Timothy and the orchestra as is. Maybe we should get a second conductor to cue the spatialized saxophones, just to make it easier and make it efficient. But you're like, no. Let me see if I can handle this. And I'm like,
But there's another reason why. Do you remember the other reason? The other reason was this: is I was thinking, and I always think about this when I bring a new piece into the world. I was thinking, you're going to get so many more performances of this piece if it does not require a second conductor.
all right, and that was the convincing element. I was like, okay, all right, I'll go with that. You sold me. Yeah.
What a conductor. That's good. Such a hitting the composer right where they need to be hit. That's good. How many more performances? Great. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Actually, we were just talking about that for a composer, getting a first performance is hard. Getting a second performance
terribly
is
difficult.
way more challenging.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like for a composer, okay. First of all, like especially a large-scale orchestral work, anything beyond 15 minutes. Okay, the first performance, the premiere, is a trial run. That is the first time, as a composer, you're actually going to hear it live, and there's always little things that can be improved upon in the process of the rehearsal process. And so, after that first performance, many of us would just desperately desire to have a second performance, to get a second go at it, just to make those little changes that we learned during the first performance. And unfortunately, many composers don't get that, which is really sad. It really is sad, because it doesn't allow us to be able to realize our artistic vision, our musical vision, as we hoped it to be. It's almost like just not achieving that one thing that or like getting that. It's like making that dish, that your favorite dish, your grandmother's dish, and you only have that one shot at it, okay, and that's it. And you're like, oh, the first time was just a trial run. I wish I could just do it again, just to
Less pepper the second time.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of a thing. So
More pepper. It's hard to say, really. I'm certain this will get many plays because it is a phenomenal piece of music. Even listening to the MIDI file, which for those of you, a MIDI file is like a computerized soundscape of the music before it's been heard by human ears. Even listening to the MIDI file, I mean, it's a fascinating piece of music. And the way you have worked, what I find fascinating is like the instruments themselves are flocks of birds. You actually hear them take off in so many moments, which is brilliant.
And there's also thank you, first of all. Yeah, keep it coming. There's also one thing that I've done the first time ever in any of my orchestral works, and that is in the second movement, I have the orchestra for most of the movement doing nothing, just sitting quietly, because it's a duet between Timothy and the marimba player, with the spatialized saxophones doing a call and response to the melodies that Timothy is playing. I mean, there is one moment where the orchestra does come in, but that's at the climactic moment, and then they dissipate. But that, for me, I thought...
They're so grateful for that little break, I'm sure.
know,
Yeah.
I'm sure. Actually, because I just felt that I gave them so much in the first and last movement that, you know what, this would be a nice reprieve where, especially also for the audience, just to be able just to hear Timothy. I mean, just the beauty of the saxophone instrument, just savoring the saxophone instrument, playing on stage with the simple chorale-like chords on the marimba with the other saxophones, just supporting him. And I thought, you know what, this is something that I feel this piece needs, and I know that the orchestra, it'd be nice to also, for as part of the audience member, just to see the orchestra sitting and resting and being in that peaceful state as I would be when I'm going to listen to this piece. And it's just something that where I want the orchestra as, you know, players and as human beings, I wanted that collective experience to be able to experience this very carefully delicate moment together as a group. So that was a risk that I never done in my in my orchestra works ever before, but I felt in this case it was necessary. So
Brilliant.
thanks.
Thank you both for being in Saskatoon this week. I know, right? That flew right by. Flew right by. Thank you both for being in Saskatoon. Thank you both for your hard work this week. We have one of our musicians here. Thank you for your hard work this week. This is a big undertaking, and it is thrilling to be able to live in a city where we have an orchestra that does this, and that I think really matters a lot. And I know our audience knows that, which means a lot.
Well, I got to tell you, it means a lot as a composer to be here because what you're doing with the Saskatoon Symphony Orchestra is amazing, and not only because not only because you're playing my music or anything, but you actually listen to me. You actually ask me what it is that I want to do. You ask me what is your creative vision, and I got the sense that you want to help you want to facilitate my creative vision. And I say that it's in all sincerity because, well, I've been a professional composer for 20 odd years. And one of my pet peeves is whenever an administrator from an orchestra calls me and says, hey, we love a 10-minute work from you. It's got to be this theme. It's got to be this. It's got to have all these criteria. And by the end of it, I have no say. I'm not able to share my opinion. Well, what if I have this? No, this is what we want. It's almost as if like I'm just like fulfilling their vanity project. And this is why this project is so special, because you know that I want to write this piece for Timothy. You know how many years I've written for a saxophone instrument, and you know that this is a passion project, and you felt it. And so that's why I'm always eager to be here in Saskatoon to work with your orchestra. It's always a great time.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Do
This
we
is a
have any
pleasure.
questions from the room?
Yeah.
Alex.
Yes. So what's it like to work with a bunch of musicians who will just do anything you put in front of them? It's an amazing thing to me that this orchestra can just do what you put in front of them, and time again, I've always been impressed. It's like, my goodness, that was not part of the syllabus when I was in the conservatory.
Great. It's a great question. So the question is for the cameras. The question is, what's it like to be able to have a group of musicians in front of you who will just do whatever you put in front of them?
I think that the first answer, sort of cheeky, is that there's no other option. You show up on Monday night.
That's a good point.
And you've got the music in front of you, and it's like you're slalom skiing. There's only one way out, and you've got to land as gracefully as you can. But I think that there's also a sense for musicians and artists in general, but musicians, you know, that this great challenge that's in front of us, this great opportunity to sort of hear the world, experience the world, be in the world in a different way is really quite extraordinary. And I think, I mean, we've had one rehearsal so far last night, and I think already the orchestra has a sense of like, wow, this is really different for us. This is really something extraordinary. I don't think the orchestra's ever played the Rachmaninoff, or most people there had never played it.
Right. And I don't think we've ever done it.
And I'm not sure that Kalamalka's been played here.
Nope.
So these very well could be Saskatoon world premieres.
Wow.
3 world premieres. Yeah. Well, two Saskatoon premieres and a world premiere. But I love that. I love the idea of broadening your horizon and trying something new and letting it inform other things that you already know how to do and want to do. So we're all in 100%. Take no prisoners.
I personally don't know how to answer that because
Because you just put things in front of musicians and expect them to do it.
well, yeah. Well, first of all, the soloist Brian Allen was extraordinary, and it was just wonderful to be here and witness that performance. It was just so fantastic. It was like, like every performance, especially a premiere, for me is like experiencing a birth, especially a premiere. And so when it's an orchestral work, even more so because anything can go wrong. Anybody who's had children will tell you like anything can go wrong in labor. And so I'm just sitting there like this, but it's out of my hands, and I just have to let the conductor musicians work their magic.
Well, and it is kind of it's an interesting relationship, a composer and conductor, because as much as I want to get inside Vince's head, at some point Vince has to let go and say, okay, Robert's and Timothy really have to just sort of own this.
Oh my
because if
goodness,
we
yeah.
don't, then it's going to seem as awkward as the experience you've had, where an orchestra says you must do this, and this.
Right. And that's one of the things I had to learn right away when I started as a professional composer, is when to just let go. Actually, I won't forget it. The one time the pivotal moment when I learned that lesson was when I wrote The Shaman for Evelyn Glennie. The premiere was in Winnipeg, 2011. And I poured my heart into that piece. Now, during the process of writing that piece, for the first time, I had a musician just send me messages and say, you know what, I don't think this is going to work. I want to change this to do this. And I was like, how dare you? But I thought, well, it's Evelyn Glennie. You know what? Let's just see what
She knows a thing or two.
Yeah, she knows a thing. And it's like, okay, you know what? Let's try that and try it. And so during the course, when we finally got to meet during the first day of rehearsals, she made a few changes here and there, and we discussed them. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you have in mind? You know what? I like that better. You know what? You're right. And you know how many times I've said you're right to her during that course of that week? And so that's when I realized that, okay, you know what? There's only so much I can control. I only have the perspective of a composer that I wrote, of how I hear it in my head and how I've tried to realize it as best I could in notation form. But when it comes to the performer, they're seeing it from a different perspective, especially someone of that caliber, where she's bringing all this experience to share with me to open my eyes to what can be done.
I think that's exactly right. And when you're conducting a piece, you're also thinking, well, how do I make this work physically for the musicians? How do I make it work musically? How do I make it work emotionally, psychologically? There are just a lot of factors that when you're sitting at your desk writing a piece may seem logical, but when you're in real life with actual human beings may need slight adjustments. I can say that almost every premiere I've ever done and every new piece I've ever done, I've always made slight adjustments in for balance and for, maybe tempo slightly or dynamic slightly or whatever, just to kind of work it so that I can really try to bring home the concept that the composer was trying to get across.
And that brings us to a factor that is so critical when it comes to world premieres for conductor, performer, and composer relations is trust. Is to have that trust. Now, from my correspondences with Robert, he earned my trust. He asked all the right questions, all right? And I'm like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy knows what he's doing. Also, I've seen, his track record with the Windsor Symphony. He seems to know what he's doing. And so I even, actually, as of a few days ago, I emailed Robert and Timothy McAllister, and I told them, by the way, I forgot to tell you, if there's anything in this work that you feel you have any suggestions to change, or even sections that you feel needs to be taken out, let me know. We can discuss it, and we can talk about it, and anything that you can provide to make this a successful performance.
And I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that. But what was interesting about that is what you were saying about the first performance, because my response to you was, I'm going to do everything I can to make what you wrote come to life the way you wrote it, and let me see what I can do with it.
See, and I'm coming from a different point of view. I'm thinking I want to hear what you have to say throughout my piece. Okay, I want to hear, it's much like how, the best example that or analogy I can think of is how Martin Scorsese directs his films. And how he directs his films is that he keeps it open, and he has the best actors and actresses in the world. He knows that. And so he encourages them to go off script if they feel that magic, that chemistry. And by doing that, he has created some of the most iconic film scenes of Hollywood. And so that's how I approach working with soloists, musicians, and conductors. It's like, okay, if you have an idea that's really inspires you, let me know. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear you through my music. Okay, I wrote the notes. Yeah, sure. But this is just, I hate to say this or admit it, but it's generally guidelines, all right? But it's okay to go off.
That's how I played your music. Yeah.
Yeah, and you got it, and you got glowing review from it. Yes, there you go. That's what I'm talking. And that's why I love working with great music. I got spoiled, actually. I do get spoiled. We're working with someone like Dame Evelyn Glennie, like Timothy McAllister, where when they go off script because they feel that moment, those are the moments for me as a composer. It's like, wow. I hear who they are through my music. I hear their contribution through what they're doing in my music that I could have never dreamed up. Sure, they went a little longer than expected, but it doesn't matter. It was a moment. They created like an amazing moment that could only be created at that space and time. So that's just I hate to. Sorry if I'm comparing myself to Martin Scorsese, but that's the principle of just giving your quote unquote actors or actresses the freedom to just be in their element, and who knows what magic can occur. So
Good answer.
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you again to Adele for hosting us here at Dervilia, and we'll see you at the Symphony on Saturday.
Thank you all so much.
By the way, you're Robert De Niro, so.
I know.